Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento. And in today's episode, almost 600 episodes in, there are some big entrepreneurial topics that apply to every single one of us, but yet we've never talked about on this show. And today's guest is going to smash through that barrier for us because I'm excited to be joined by the very awesome Adam Struss. He's got a lot of really interesting experience, but also some really cool things that he's doing for entrepreneurs because let's face it, there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to entrepreneurship from a financial aspect, from a life insurance, for example, aspect. There's so much that we lose when we lose the 9-to-5, but it's important for us to think about. So let me tell you a little bit about Adam. Adam is a Pennsylvania life insurance agent and founder of Struss Consulting. He's worked at a director level in 3 successful startup laboratories, which is the experience that gave him insight into some of the common financial hardships that business owners run into. Adam believes in creating valuable partnerships and developing unique solutions for businesses of all sizes. He has a lot of thoughts, not only on his field of expertise, but also business that I'm really excited to dive into. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview today with Adam Struss. All right, Adam, dude, welcome to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Hey, Brian, thanks so much for having me, man. I'm super stoked to be here.
Heck yeah, we're going to be talking about important things. And Adam, I'm going to confess to you that as a business podcast host, this may not be the sexiest topic. People always want to talk about marketing and tech and tools and all that. But the reality is, when I started this podcast back in 2016, I promised myself and my audience that we would talk about things that directly face us as entrepreneurs. And this is one of those less talked about topics. So I'm excited for you to break into that for us. But before we do exactly that, kind of give us your backstory. How the heck did you end up where you are today?
Yeah. So like you mentioned, I've worked in a few startup laboratories, more or less help them, from the ground up, build these things. And, as I was doing that, I kind of understood and started learning, how difficult it can be to, sort of bootstrap things together. One thing led to the next, and, I kind of started to get the entrepreneurial itch. A lot of people say, your 9-to-5 is somebody else's passive income. And, as I was, doing all the work for this stuff, I was like, hey, what are some things that these businesses aren't taking advantage of? And, just started networking with some people and, making some important relationships. And yeah, one thing led to the next and, just sort of utilized, partnerships and, the networking that I did to kind of build this thing. And that's really what it all stems around is just, successful partnerships and, good relationships with good people. I don't need to know everything. I just need to know somebody that does.
Yeah, I love that attitude because it's that collaborative element that makes entrepreneurship so much fun. And we're going to get into, because I know that that's also a core part of your sales techniques, which you don't view sales the way that everybody else views sales. You view it, you've already said the word partnership a few times. That gets me super excited to dive into that. But before we do, I want to clarify for listeners that there's really 2 elements of your business that drew us in, where I was just like, okay, we need to talk to Adam. And that is 2 fields that are fascinating to me. One is profit recovery, which we're going to dive into in just a second. And the second part is life insurance. And I think this is interesting because whether you already have a business and profit recovery is something that could land you literally tens of thousands of extra dollars in cash, or you're just completely starting out from scratch with life insurance, for example, that's a big consideration for us as entrepreneurs. A lot of considerations just when we're starting out. But I want to highlight profit recovery first, because a lot of our listeners, they start having revenue. Maybe they've hired freelancers. So there is traction in their business. And I want to read something from your website, strussconsulting.com, which we'll talk about at the end. But when it comes to profit recovery, you wrote, most businesses believe the only way to grow is to increase sales. But this is not true. Adam, this is a new world for us. Talk to us about profit recovery.
Yeah. So, like my website says, a lot of people think that the only way you can, increase your revenue or, grow your business is to increase sales. I mean, that's not necessarily true. Every business, has a CPA or a financial advisor that they work with. And, the unfortunate part is, and, the reason why I partner with, so many CPAs is to kind of give them the ability to do the things that the bigger firms are doing without needing to bring additional employees in to do this. But yeah, essentially, what profit recovery focuses on is, leveraging these areas of the tax code that, a lot of CPAs aren't doing for their clients because they don't have the time and resources to do. So things like the employee retention tax credit, R&D tax credits, and even cost segregations for the property, that the building is on, and the assets within the building, and, just appreciating these things the right way. They're pretty unique, but it's something that, probably 90% of, businesses are eligible for, and people just don't file because they don't know about them.
Yeah, I like how you already said that not every CPA is even going to find this stuff because even they can't keep up with it. So how the heck are we as entrepreneurs to keep up with it? And I like that you gave us those 3 tangible examples: employee tax credit and the R&D tax credit and cost segregation study. Obviously, we have no idea what those things are. Educate us on that stuff, Adam.
Sure. Yeah. So to dive a little bit deeper into those things, the employee retention tax credit was part of the CARES Act that was signed, due to the coronavirus. And essentially what it is to help business owners out for staying in business throughout the time of the pandemic. We all know that it was a hard time, and, economically there was a lot going on. So, this credit can earn business owners up to $26,000 per employee. And they do this based on an average. So essentially say, you had 10 employees from 2019 through 2022 on average, you would be eligible for $26,000 times those 10 employees, $250,000 potentially could be your credit if you qualify for, each quarter individually. So that one's really cool.
Real quick, I just want to jump in there. When you talk about the tax credit, is that something that it gets deducted from your tax bill, or is that, cash in hand sent to you from the government?
That's a great question. And the answer to that is you'll actually get 6 separate checks. So there's 6 quarters of eligibility, and you'll receive 6 separate checks depending on, how you qualify for each individual one.
I love that. And for so many business owners who, a lot of you listeners, I know because I talked to so many of you that you were in business during the pandemic, myself included, as well as other businesses that I either own or have equity in. These are things that we just don't explore. And Adam's going to tell us at the end more about what that looks like. But I am going to throw a little bit of a teaser. Adam, I know that I've looked into your business, but you and I didn't talk that much before we hit record here today. But I already know that part of your workflow is you love digging into real life businesses and seeing if they're eligible for this, to see if you can even help them before we get there. But I'm totally jumping the gun. Continue down the path you were on because I love learning about this stuff.
Sure. So on top of the ERTC, there's also the R&D tax credit. This credit essentially is to help business stay in the United States, typically research and development centered businesses, but they want to kind of keep all of the new and emerging ideas within the United States. So if you're a business that's located in the United States and you pay contractors to develop, new products, procedures, or software, you would probably be eligible. And a bunch of things that go into that are things like your contractor cost, your inputs for any of these products that you're making, and then obviously any of the development work that goes into, making these products. So that the credit usually comes out to 1% to 2% of the company's annual revenue, essentially just returned to them dollar for dollar based on these expenditures.
Yeah, so I just want to jump in on this one as well, because I know for a fact, having talked to obviously so many guests on this show, as well as so many listeners who run maybe 4-figure a month businesses, 5-figure a month businesses, 6 or 7-figure a month businesses, who right now AI is obviously all the rage, and more businesses are developing AI platforms on top of their already existing businesses. Are we talking about that sort of software development that maybe traditionally they'd outsource to Upwork, that now they could get paid to bring it back to either their own employees themselves or people here in the US?
Yeah, that's exactly it, Brian. That type of business would be eligible. Doctors' offices, because they're always making improvements on, their own procedures and things like that. Really big ones are, manufacturing type companies. We just did one recently for a metal roofing development company. But yeah, essentially any type of business that's developing a product or process, they should be eligible.
I love that overview. And especially because you're right, it does apply to so many. Obviously, here, a lot of us have online businesses, but hearing you talk about doctors' offices, like the research and development, we always tend to think of software, but it's interesting to think how many aspects of our businesses apply to so many different areas that we may not internally consider research and development. We might consider the normal operations and expansions of our business, but it's fascinating to hear, which is also, as you're talking about this, it makes more and more sense. Profit recovery is because we don't realize that we could be recovering this stuff. So that's 2 out of the 3 that you mentioned up front. Educate us on that cost segregation study.
Yeah, cost segs are really cool. It's essentially, doing something that pretty much every business owner is already doing. So if you own the business that you operate out of, you're probably depreciating the building. But typically that schedule is done on, a 27 and a half year schedule. And what cost segregation does, and funny story is this actually came across to the IRS because they got sued. I don't remember the name of the entity that sued them, but it was essentially over the exact thing that cost seg helps them with. And anyhow, so what this does is it takes that 27 and a half year schedule and it actually puts your depreciated items into appropriate buckets of time. So it's typically 5 years, 7 years, and 15 years. And, 5-year items would be things like carpet, blinds, things like this that, obviously aren't going to last for 27 and a half years, maybe flooring, and then the longer term items into those, 15-year buckets would probably be things like, if you've got a parking lot, structures, things like this. But basically you're just, again, putting them into the right buckets of time. So that way, they're being depreciated on an appropriate scale as opposed to, waiting for close to 30 years, when you're about to sell the business and then getting the money back. You can actually use it while you're, currently operating in your business. So it becomes a lot more useful in this sense.
Yeah, Adam, I think in 10 minutes, you just successfully did 2 things. One, you successfully showed us that the tax code is just as confusing or maybe more confusing than we could have ever believed. And 2, what I think you really showed is that there are opportunities for us. If you've been in business for a few years, or even if this is your first year, but you're making revenue, it sounds like for most businesses, there are profit recovery opportunities for us. So that's something that is obviously something that we could and should tap into, but there's no chance we're going to be able to do that alone. So I love the fact that you're coming on here and giving us that overview. And I want to pivot because this next half of our conversation, I really think applies to genuinely, and you know better than I do, Adam, so I'd love for your stamp of approval in this statement I'm about to make. But to me, this next part applies to literally every entrepreneur and wantrepreneur, because I will confess to you, Adam, while you get to work with a lot of awesome clients, I get to talk to a lot of awesome wantrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. And the number one reason why I hear people delay the starting of their business, or maybe they're just keeping it as at a side hustle instead of leaving their job, is because they're worried about life insurance. They're worried about retirement plans. They're worried about all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So obviously I want to talk about financing and long-term financial planning. It ties in with life insurance. Bring us into this umbrella. Why is this something that, 1, we don't talk about as entrepreneurs, and 2, why is it super important for us to talk about it?
Yeah, those are awesome questions, Brian. I think one of the big reasons why people, hesitate is exactly what you said, the uncertainty around, jumping into this thing on their own, not having their own benefits anymore, needing to kind of figure out all of that stuff on your own can be, nerve-wracking, I guess, for lack of a better term. But that's the reason why, like you mentioned, there's people out there that, are willing to help you. And, it's definitely something that everybody should have. And, ultimately it, can be a really nice investment vehicle for you too. Because, with the right advisor, you don't have the downsides of, the market. So when things like the coronavirus happen, if you're investing through a thing, like an index universal life plan, you don't have those downsides. Sure, you might get a 0% return, but it's better than, losing 30%, in the market, and then you still have, the same upsides. And then plus, God forbid something happens, your family is protected. So it's really a win-win.
Yeah, and I'm going to confess to you, Adam, and I'm sure you hear this confession from a lot of people where, look, you and I are both still relatively young, so it's easy for us to say, I'll worry about that later. Especially, I started my first business when I was 19. It's been very easy as a teenager throughout my 20s. Now I'm in my early 30s. It's been very easy for me to say, yeah, I'll figure that stuff out as time goes on. Now, we all hear about the power of compounding, and we all hear about, it's one of my favorite Chinese proverbs, which is the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Give us some of that impetus, because a lot of us need that urgency and that kick in the butt.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The best time is now. And, ultimately, you mentioned being, on the younger side, that is the best time, because what's going to happen is more of that premium that you're paying is going to, be able to turn into cash value. If you wait until you're older and, essentially as the policy continues to mature, the older you get, the more insurance that the policy is going to be purchasing because of, your age. Every day, it's kind of morbid, but every day we're all one step closer to, passing away. And so, knowing that this is the case, the longer you wait, the less cash value you're going to have and the more insurance you're going to need to buy, due to that inevitable fact.
Yeah, explain that a little bit more for us. Because like I said, we are breaking new boundaries here with this episode on the show. And obviously, when we all think of the financial side and replacing our full-time job benefits as entrepreneurs, we tend to think, how expensive is this going to be? But obviously, you're talking about two different sides of the coin. One is obviously the expense side, which when you're younger, it's less expensive. When you're older, it's more expensive. But also the payouts on the other side of it. So break that down for us and really talk about how time affects that equation on both sides.
Sure. So yeah, essentially, like I said, the younger you are, the more of so every month, well, actually it's not every month, it can vary. But you pay what's called a premium, and this premium, is the entirety of what you're going to pay for your policy. And a certain percentage of that premium, can be tied to particular stock indices, or, you can get essentially a constant, rate of return. If you'd rather not be tied to, any particular indice, it's going to be lower if you go that route. But basically, the younger you are and the better health that you're in, the more of that premium can be, set aside and tied to these indices to help you build cash value, as opposed to, more of that premium being used to purchase additional insurance to make sure that the lender is covered. If you're older, there's a higher chance that something is going to happen to you. So the less money that's going to be available to tie to these indices and invest for you. So the sooner the better. The younger you are and the better health that you're in, it actually makes more sense. If you're looking at it as a potential investment for yourself, along with the additional benefit to the fact that your beneficiaries are going to, eventually get your estate, make some money off the policy as well. But those are the primary benefits for something like this. And like you said, Brian, the time is now, and it's never too late either. It's always going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I love that overview. Obviously, we all know at a high level how insurance works, but it's actually really interesting to hear you talk about insurance with regards to the percentage of our premium that gets allocated to essentially an investment fund versus an insurance policy. So I hadn't thought of the distribution that way. And obviously, the younger you are, the more healthy you are, as you talked about, the better that proportion, that ratio is that you get to play off of. Adam, I didn't prep you with any questions before we hit record here today. And all of our listeners know I don't have any pre-planned questions. But in my specific case, one of the biggest hurdles in me starting my business was my student loans. I remember when I graduated, it was the biggest obstacle to me investing in myself, investing in my business. It was a big weight on my shoulders. And I love the day that I got to pay it off. But I know that not everybody is in that situation. Adam, what can you tell us about student loans? Because I know you've got a ton of fresh perspectives on that.
Yeah. And I'm super happy that you brought this up, Brian. This is, one of the things that I'm most excited about, with all of the offerings and things that, my company provides, I think this is the one that gets me the most excited because exactly what you just said. I know that there's so many people out there that are struggling with this type of thing. And, it's such a cool thing to be able to help with. And essentially what, this program does is it utilizes life insurance, as that investment vehicle to help people pay back their loans. So the way that this works is, say that you've got $100,000 of student loans. You'll take that $100,000 loan and you'll defer it for a period of, say, 20, 25 years, which again is something that is allowed as long as the loans are federal through the student loan code. And, not a lot of people know that. So you defer the loan for that period of time. And then say your loan payment is, $1,500 a month. Instead of paying $1,500 a month towards the loan, you can take $1,200 a month, put it into an indexed universal life plan that will help you get set up, and then use this indexed universal life plan, over the course of that 20 years. And you're going to have much more than enough money to pay off the loan in its entirety, which you'll get a discount on for paying it off in full in one lump sum. And, you're still going to have an in-force life insurance policy at the end of it with, cash value left in it that you can continue to invest in, for the rest of your life. So it's, a win on multiple levels.
Yeah, except the only thing that I don't see as a win here, Adam, is where the heck were you 12 years ago when I graduated with $80,000 in student loan debt?
Should have reached out, Brian.
Honestly, well, it's really good. And that's what makes me really happy is that if this episode touches that one entrepreneur who's in the place that I was in, 12 years ago when I graduated from school, then that is a huge plus. And obviously all the stuff that we've talked about here today touches on all of us, no matter where we are in life, as well as no matter where we are in business. And so that's why obviously you can't give us a total education in all of this stuff, but I really like your high level overview and the introduction. Like I said, for thousands of listeners all over the world, 600 episodes is the first time we've talked about these things. But Adam, before I let you go here today, I always like taking advantage, not just of obviously you're really good at what you do. You're really well versed in all of these things. You understand it better than 99% of all of us entrepreneurs for sure. But in addition to that, you're also a fellow entrepreneur.
I've got a good team that does that in the background for me, man. I've got really good people that work with me, and I'm just here trying to spread the word.
Heck yeah. No, I love that. But what's also really interesting is obviously you are, and you showed it as well in your attitude towards this stuff, is that you're also a fellow entrepreneur and you're growing your own business along the way. And listeners know, I've revealed this a few times in podcast history, but one of my research points is I always like to ask guests who are coming on, what is your zone of genius? What's the thing that unlocks your success? And for you, I loved your answer to it because you went straight to altruism. You made it very clear that that's part of how you view sales as well, as that you just view it as how am I best able to serve you? And I can see now, obviously having had the chance to interview you, that your work touches on so many different facets of life and business and finances and retirement and all of these things. So it makes sense to me that you have that really partnership approach to it. You know a lot of people and you are interested in helping a lot of people. Talk to us about that on an entrepreneurial level. Aside from all the financial stuff that we've talked about, how does that play into your success as an entrepreneur and as a person?
Yeah, I mean, just to put it, kind of bluntly, Brian, I think that is my success. I would almost holistically attribute, almost everything that I've accomplished up until, this point in my life. It's a simple saying, but it's one that I like. It's called, do the next right thing. You're not always going to make the right choices, in life, in business, or in, really anything. But when you do make a mistake or you make, the wrong choice, just try to make the next right choice when another, scenario comes up. And, that's the way I live my life. That's the way I, try to run my business. And that's the way that I look at all of this stuff. I like to talk to people. I like to talk to, others like you and other people that, were in the same spot as I was when I was starting out my business. And if I can impact anybody in a positive way by doing that, I think that's a win. And ultimately, that's how I end up, partnering with, CPA firms, financial advisors, different lenders to bring on, new programs that I'm interested in. It's just about talking with people and, trying to see how you can help them. And, honestly, a lot of times one thing leads to the next, and, you end up working together and, benefiting each other. And, that's a really important aspect of business.
Heck yeah, Adam, I am a sucker for quotes. Listeners know it, but I've never heard do the next right thing. And I love so deeply the way that you also frame that concept for us, because it really is about accepting the fact that whatever happened prior doesn't matter. Do the next right thing. Whether your actions leading up to it were great or not so great, still do the next right thing. It's advice and a mantra that always applies. So I love that. It's such a fitting way to close our episode. Obviously, talking about so much of this deep stuff, but guess what? Doing the next right thing also applies there. Whether you've ignored this stuff for the life of your business or you're just starting out, you still and always have the chance to do the next right thing. So Adam, we've talked about so many things, and I feel like this is an episode where I always hope that listeners get a actionable tidbit from an episode. But today, I think the actionable tidbit is that they need to reach out to somebody who obviously can look into this stuff for them, because it's a really complex world for us to figure out ourselves. So I think this is the perfect time to open the floor to you. Tell listeners where they can learn more about you, your business, and all these things that we talked about here today.
Yeah, Brian. I appreciate that. And, like I said, when I, first came on, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being able to talk to you, being able to connect with, all of these, great listeners that you have. So, I'm humbled and very thankful for, this opportunity. You guys can, visit my website, www.strussconsulting.com. We also have a Facebook page. My name is Adam Struss. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And I'd be happy to connect with any of you guys there. And, even if it's just for a chat, talk about what you guys do and, potentially how I could help. I would be excited to be able to do that with, any of you guys.
Heck yes. I love that generous offer to all of our listeners. And I know that they're going to be so excited to check out your website. So listeners, you all know the deal. The links that Adam just mentioned are down below, but his direct business website is strussconsulting.com. That's his last name, Struss, Struss consulting.com. We'll link to it down below, wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode. Otherwise, Adam, thank you so much for the kind words. Thanks for sharing so much of your wisdom with us here today. And thank you so much for coming on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Of course, Brian. Thanks again for having me, man. Appreciate you.